Hi everyone, welcome. We're going to just wait a few moments to see to allow everyone just to join the call. So wait a few moments. Maybe if you've got an opportunity, we've closed off the chat function, but you can post a comment in the questions. Maybe share with us the location that you're from, and when was the last time you took a business trip. But you'll just wait a few more moments to allow everyone to dial in. Thanks. All good on Andrew and Greg. Yep, all good. Great. Okay, good. All right, well, it's just a few moments after the start time. So again, thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully we might have a few more join now. But what I'd like to do is, welcome you to the State of the Market report on business travel. My name's Felicity Burke from the 4D Group. We're the business consulting division of Flight Centre. I'm going to be facilitating today's webinar, and I'm joined by two of my fellow Flight Centre leaders, Greg Parker and Andrew Gallard. They're industry experts in their respective fields of aviation and accommodation. And I'll briefly hand over to Greg to introduce yourself.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Felicity. Great to have so many of you guys join us on the call today. I look after global air supply for the group as well as the Australian product business. A key part of my responsibility covers managing our airline and GDS relationships, both in Australia and globally, and also commercial partnerships. I've worked extensively in the Australian New Zealand business in airline and distribution for about 30 years. And I've had the pleasure of being with Flight Centre for the last 17, and since about 2009, dealing with our global airline and GDS partners.
Great. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.
And Andrew.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Andrew Gallard. It's great to be here today. Thanks very much for joining the webinar. I look after the part of the Flight Centre Group called the Global Procurement Network, and a key responsibility for my team is hotel contracting and supplier relationships in the land space, so hotel, car, and door-to-door. I've been with Flight Centre for 20 years, and the last 10 years in the hotel contracting space for the corporate brands within Flight Centre.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for that introduction. Okay, so we're excited to have on the call today those of you who've dialed in actually from corporate procurement at the customers that we work with, but also we've got travel suppliers and different travel industry peers and industry groups. So really excited to have everyone dial in. We are actually across Australia and New Zealand, so good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'm going to take you through and walk you through the global state of the market report, which was released 21st of September, and it was a report based on a moment in time. So I'm sure a lot of information has since progressed to change, and that's what we actually want to talk to you about today. Is what has changed and what is the future going to look like. So in terms of presentation, I'll take you through a couple of different aspects of the Australia and New Zealand research. Then I'm going to hand over to Greg and then Andrew, who each of them going to take us through their take on what the future holds. So I'll move on to a little bit of a background to the report. Is obviously when COVID-19 occurred, it was first happening in China during the months of January into February, and a lot of industries there started to take in the reality. But I think as the virus started to spread around the world, we really didn't know how long this was going to be in our lives and what it actually meant for our corporate customers and also the travel industry. So we took it upon ourselves to run a lot of different research, and two of those research modules were surveys back in May and then also June. So that was a survey of our corporate customers and also other customers from around the world. We then just most recently in August conducted a very extensive, really deep dive interview process with our corporate customers, both in FCM, Stage and Screen, Corporate Traveller and FCBT. And those interview processes that we had with our customers, as I said, was a really deep interview process, collecting a lot of information of, okay, it's now August, what have you been doing? How has your reaction been across the business, and what do you see as the future? This research again was all around the fact that we just didn't know, what was going to be happening next, and nor did we fully could see how each of our customers and the different industries that they travel for, how that was going to impact them in the future. The data that we've collected is definitely across a lot of different businesses, small enterprise right up to large global enterprise customers. So it was really, really great to be able to share the findings last month. And during the course of this week and next week, the Flight Centre Travel Group corporate teams are doing these types of webinars all around the world. So if you wanted to dial in to get a different perspective for some of the other markets, those webinars are happening this week and next week as well. So I guess, what does this all mean? All this research that we did, what does it mean to Australia and New Zealand? And I have to say, both markets, traditionally, I've been in travel for, 20, 25 years, and both markets, Australia and New Zealand, have always been very similar. But I don't think we could have had such a contrast and such a different perspective of what was going to play out. New Zealand, you have certainly bounced back the quickest, and we'll talk a little bit more around that later. But I think overall, T&E expenses are going to be a lot more reduced here in Australia and New Zealand compared to the rest of the world. And that I would suspect is a reflection of just a little bit of a reduction in the frequency of travel for the year ahead. The other changes or differences that we saw across the two markets compared to the rest of the world was obviously the top organisations and industries that were travelling, mining, construction and wholesale trade. A little bit different to what was happening in the rest of the world, where those who were first to travel, those industries first to travel, typically in the financial services and also professional services area as well. So yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I think, obviously New Zealand bouncing back first with aviation was very exciting. And I think everyone in Australia felt that we too were going to follow in those footsteps. We unfortunately haven't. But I think the lessons learned for New Zealand going first, and no different to China, because China business travel started to rebound very quickly after they stopped earlier this year, is some of the lessons learned were, what is defined as business critical travel, and a lot of corporate travelers were sort of questioning, am I allowed to travel? What's the process? What's the approvals? So I think some great learnings and takeaways that we got from talking to our customers. Definitely, when we look at what are the priorities for the year ahead, absolutely duty of care was number one globally. And that is, obviously not just the traditional, traveller tracking, it is checking in on travellers' well-being, checking to see that if travellers do need to make a trip, that they're comfortable to do that and it is safe to do that. So duty of care has taken on a completely different focus for everyone in corporate, and we can sort of see that the next 12 months it'll be a very, very strong focus. I think the interesting aspect here in both of the markets compared to the rest of the world was an increased focus in updating and changing travel policies. And I must admit, I'm actually working with several customers now in revising, refining their travel policy to make sure it's robust and fit for purpose as we move into next year. And the third one there, priority for the year ahead is budget and costs. And I think that goes without saying, is everyone is wanting their travel budget to go as far as possible to make sure that they can grow their business and grow their profitability. So yes, so some interesting trends. I think, you know, when we look at travel approval, again, online booking tools very much are going to drive the ability to have online approval, and also allow corporate travel managers and procurement teams, allow them to sort of see and watch what travel requests are coming through in the future. So yeah, some really interesting trends that came out of the research relating to both markets. So I guess the exciting part is, yes, we are traveling, and albeit in different stages and phases, and Greg's got some great information to share with you shortly, but essentially for Australia and New Zealand, the rebound has been quite strong. Obviously in Australia, we're seeing a lot of intra-state travel, such as Western Australia, who are, you know, traveling quite strong again. In the eastern states in Australia, that is not the case, but we are definitely getting ready. But overall, 56% of the businesses that we are working with are back to travel. And you can see here on screen the different industry groups that are traveling. I think the really interesting one, as I mentioned before, financial services and professional services here in the two markets aren't traveling as strong as other parts of the world. And what was interesting is in Asia, education and training, the academia world is starting to travel again. So some different contrasts around the world, but I think all in all, we are starting to get ready to travel. So this kind of is a great couple of slides to lead into Greg's section, but the pace of recovery for aviation has been extremely patchy. And what we've got on screen here is just really sharing on the left-hand side the regional rebounds, and you can see that yellow top line of Asia that is being driven and led by China. And you can see Australia and New Zealand, so that is Australasia, we're the dotted yellow line, and we're quite down low, but obviously we're ready to bounce back. I thought what was really interesting is, and encouraging I think as well, is to share with you the top 15 city pairs globally. Now what we did here is we took the top city pairs based on September 2019 and compared them to what are the seats that were on offer during September 2020. And you can see here, you know, two of the China routes, Beijing and Shanghai, and Guangzhou and Shanghai are both off the charts. And what that's really indicating is the bounce back in China has gone beyond last year's September seats that were offered. So I think really exciting, and also great to see Korea, Japan also on the chart there as well. Obviously, the bounce back for aviation is really going to be driven by government regulations, the overall affordability of flights, the health of the nation, traveller confidence, and also the financial viability for the airlines to operate. So yeah, I think some really good green shoots starting to definitely show. However, when we look at the domestic market, the Australia rebound has been quite bumpy, and look how encouraging the New Zealand domestic rebound has been. Some exciting information there. So I think if we peel that down a little bit more and we look at the top city pairs for Australia, we are 95% down on the same time last year for September. So we've got a long way to go, but already looking at New Zealand, down 52% compared to last year. So definitely they're halfway back, which is, that is really encouraging. And I think what I might do is now hand over to Greg, and you'll take us through your views on the research, Greg, how this translates or does not translate to your experience in the aviation, and what are some of the predictions we're looking at.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Felicity. Obviously, the global insights gained through this engagement have been extremely extensive over the last couple of months. No surprises, though, the pandemic has pretty much decimated the airline industry around the globe, and obviously here in Australia and New Zealand as well. The majority of our airline partners have had to restructure their businesses. This has been scaling back in networks, furloughing staff, standing them down to accommodate the government restrictions, obviously new flying restrictions in play. Most have also reviewed the current aircraft efficiencies and assessed whether they're actually fit for purpose in what they think the new world's going to look like. So broadly speaking, majority of our airline partners have adopted a more customer-centric view than what they've done in the past. And they're looking aggressively and encouragingly about how they engage with both loyalty of their existing database, but also in the distribution network as well. Majority have made or are in the process of making some necessary changes to their offerings in terms of health, hygiene and protocols, and Flick mentioned it before, obviously duty of care as well. But obviously in the early days, there were a lot of inconsistencies because it sort of hit us so quickly. Not just a lack of common approach across the industry and across our airline partners, but even with airline partners within themselves, they struggled to get out of a regional focus and start thinking more globally. So this has been pretty tough on the whole supply chain. So from airlines to obviously a lot of our loyal customers that are on this webinar as well, and obviously those servicing the supply needs. And at times it's been pretty frustrating because the double handling that's gone in play has added a lot of additional cost to a lot of different players in the supply chain. But I suppose the good news to all this is a lot of confusion in the early days is now gone. We can now see a road to recovery. So what I thought I'd do now quickly is just share with you what we are seeing in terms of capacity being reinstated. So to probably reiterate a little bit what Felicity has gone through and some of the trends that we're seeing around future demand as well. So just in terms of what's sort of coming back and when you actually look at Australia and New Zealand, the top 10 searches out of Australia is no surprises, it's pretty much domestic. That's what's firing back the first way. But then when you start looking at some of the international rates that are coming through, you look at China sitting at about 114% of capacity, which was obviously compared back to pre-COVID levels. What we're seeing a trend within corporates is not as much in the way of overnight trips. There's a lot of day trips coming through, and that's obviously resulting in an increase in demand. When you actually look at APAC across the board, so Japan's probably sitting at about 70% capacity, and then you're looking at Taiwan and Korea, probably very similar to pre-COVID levels as well. But when you start measuring APAC, obviously the dynamics in the market down here in Australia and New Zealand's obviously been faster to bounce back for domestic. They're sitting about 80% of capacity, and Australia's probably sitting in the last week roughly around that 21 to 22% capacity. So there's some green shoots showing in international, but a lot of it's actually governed by the caps coming into the country as well. And a lot of it's actually governed by, I suppose, repatriation flights coming in and out as well. So there's obviously also, just if you have a look at this slide that's on at the moment, when you actually look at supply versus the average booking rate, you'll always see how supply actually outstrips the amount of bookings that's coming through. So I'll give some insights into that as to how we see that playing out a little bit later on, just in terms of pricing. So Felicity, do you want to maybe flick to the next slide, if possible? So this is the shopping activity that we're seeing, and I'm going to focus on domestic here. Well, I'm going to focus on country actually, because it's probably the best way to look at it. So again, having a look at what's happening out of country origin in Australia. So having a look at this at the moment. So as you can see, China's sitting at about 4.1%, but with the 62% sitting here in Australia, the countries that are coming back the fastest in terms of searches is the UK is the #1 search for us on an international basis out of Australia. It's then followed by India, which is a lot of visiting friends and relatives, so VFR traffic. And then obviously USA, and we're seeing Sydney and Melbourne being the closest coming through to LA. But then all the talk around the Trans-Tasman bubble, you would probably think that New Zealand should be sitting in those top 10 searches, on those top 5 searches, but they're not. New Zealand's sort of sitting at that #4 level at the moment. So you know, we're probably a little bit surprised by that. And this is sort of up to date as of last week, and it's come from our GDS partner Sabre. So it's probably the most accurate view of data that we've got, because they're sort of looking at things real time. So flicking through to the next one, Felicity, would be great. Country of origin, New Zealand, similar thing, 62%, and the top 10 searches are all domestic New Zealand. But when you start looking at international, New Zealand are very much focused on what this trans-Tasman bubble can look like. So they're sitting around that 15% of searches out of New Zealand at the moment are looking at Australia. The UK, again, up there in the top 4, sitting at about 8%. And then what we're really surprised by is Vietnam's up there around the same level as well. And we probably didn't see that, but that's obviously a lot of VFR traffic and a little bit of corporate trade as well. So that's probably an indicative view of what capacity looks like and then what we're seeing. But something very important to note when you start looking at capacity, when capacity is reinstated in a market around the globe, capacity generally doesn't go backward. So there's only one region in the world that's gone backwards on capacity, and that's Argentina. So you'll find that the levels that we've got now in terms of capacity is only going to be going up from here. So I think that's a really positive trend when you're looking at the future. So there's also a lot of activity with our airline partners at the moment, trying to install a lot of confidence back in travel. So Australia and New Zealand in particular are still a little bit behind, unfortunately, as a result of some of these border restrictions that are in play. But I think it's important to sort of look at some of the protocols that the airlines are putting in place in terms of pre-departure, at airport check-in, at airport departure gates, and similarly on board the aircraft. And they're also doing a lot of activity about, you know, how airport hubs actually transition through this process as well, and what do they have to do for the retail shopping experience. So some of the great innovation that's happening with our partners is there's PCR requirements about 96 hours out, just in terms of COVID testing to make sure customers are safe. There's enhanced tech for online and contactless check-in. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening with facial recognition. There's temperature screening. There's education around hospital-grade air filtration systems on board the aircraft, and a lot of education around how the air flows on an aircraft versus other modes of transport to try to get some confidence in there. There's obviously sanitation, mask coverings and whatever, deep cleaning processes, but also meal service protocols. But some of the cool stuff that we're seeing in terms of product innovation is the ability to obviously purchase or be able to be allocated neighbour-free seating on board the aircraft. And we've even got a couple of airline partners that are trying some really cool stuff, which is looking at actually having their airport lounges located away from the airport. So you actually can check in, you have a lot of social distance, you can do all your customs and immigration, and then they take you in a car directly to the airport as well. So over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, there's some really good stuff happening in this space. So many of these airlines that we're dealing with at the moment are seeing it as an opportunity to reinvent their offerings and position themselves at the forefront of consideration for the customers. So just in terms of some of our corporates at the moment, from the survey, you see about 55% of our corporates globally are looking to review their airline strategy. So I can touch on that in a little bit later, but before I probably hand over to Andrew, just a common question that I think would be worth sort of talking through is all these additional protocols in place, how do we actually see that playing out on airline pricing and airfare pricing? So our view is that competition for supply, as it has been for the years from GFC all the way through to now, will continue to be fierce. We have an additional airline or an expansion of an airline being Regional Express in Australia that's going to be adding some more capacity into the trunk routes. And all our airline partners have, as I said, restructured and lowered their cost base. So whilst we might see a bit of rationalisation with airlines reviewing their network and what origins and destinations they fly to, there'll always be another airline in the wings that will come and sort of take up those airline slots, because they're always at a premium. So broadly speaking, as supply, as we saw on that slide, has always outstripped demand, I think it'll keep pricing in check, and there will be some really good deals and choices to be had, which is great, obviously, for customers looking and focused on duty of care and looking to manage their spend. So they're probably the key things, Felicity, I think, from our side and talking to those slides.
Great, thanks, Greg. I'd actually just have one question. What will, and you mentioned, you know, pricing and you know, obviously early on there was a bit of confusion with schedules as the airlines started to kind of, you know, normalize themselves in certain markets around capacity versus demand. So that was really great insight. I guess, you know, closer to home, you know, what will Virgin Mark II look like, and do you think they'll eventually fly Trans-Tasman again? I know I'm really putting you on the spot with this question.
No, you can actually, Felicity. It's a really good question. We've been staying extremely close to our Virgin guys as they've gone through administration and obviously through Bain being the successful bidder. I think it's been a really good capital injection into the Virgin business. They've got a strong cash runway as they sort of come through this. And yes, they've rationalised some of their aircraft offerings and they've got rid of quite a few lease conditions that they've got on their aircraft, but they've got a really good position to be able to scale again. In the early stages, obviously domestic is going to be a key focus for them, but they are very much committed to that short haul close to home. So the Trans-Tasman sector, the South Pacific, flying into obviously Bali as well, that's definitely on the radar in the short to medium term. And long term, they're actually looking at international to come back in as well. And that's been highly documented and publicised through obviously some of the Virgin briefs that have come out. So, you know, we're quite excited to see where Virgin go from here. They've got a very low cost base, one that's enviable in the industry. So I think it'd be really good to watch this space and watch them grow again.
Great, that's good. Okay, and then I can see I've got time for one more question. You know, obviously you mentioned before that corporates are going to be looking at reviewing their airline strategy. What are some of the key things that you would be suggesting that they look out for or should be asking for in their new commercial contracts with airlines?
Yeah, good question, Felicity. I mean, knowledge is obviously power. And our airline partners, as I mentioned, are doing a lot of work at the moment around educating customers on what their offerings are and protocols to try to differentiate themselves from their competitors. So it's really important from a corporate proposition that you have a great understanding of the marketplace and what's on offer. Just because you've been loyal to a particular brand previously, I'd challenge you to sort of look around and see what's out there. There's going to obviously be winners and losers in the supply space, in our view. So look for offerings in our mind that have unrestricted flexibility. So flexibility to be able to change and be able to refund if a future travel credit is not working for you. So in our view, I think the partners that will win a lot of loyalty off the back of this will be the ones that embrace removing friction. So I just encourage you to have a really in-depth understanding of flexibility and what the duty of care offers and things are in play.
Yep, great. And I guess the other aspect is you know, a lot of us who used to travel for business, we just really don't know what our travel patterns are going to be in the future. So, you know, on a corporate side, their programs have changed a lot as well. So it's working in with your TMC and, you know, your airlines to work out what is the right future for you. So yeah, okay, great. Thanks, Greg. That was a really great insight, and I do love those graphs. I'm a bit of a graph person. Now I'd like to move to Andrew. He's going to share his views on the research findings and how they translate or not translate, as we say, as to what we're seeing across the hotel industry and what your predictions are for the future. Andrew, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Felicity. Okay, certainly from a hotel perspective, much like air, the hotel industry has been significantly impacted by the pandemic, no question at all. Back when the whole pandemic started in March, you know, the booking numbers dropped off significantly. And if you would have seen in the survey, you know, the numbers were down, with occupancy in hotels down to 70% below prior year, and even lower in some instances. During the peak of the peak of the pandemic, and that hibernation period, sort of March through to May, there was upwards of 40 to 45% of hotels closed in the market. And that was, give you some idea of the impact that these hotels were having. It was better for them to actually physically close the door than to remain open. A lot of that was impacted by China, of course, with almost 100% of hotels in that market closing. But certainly in Australia and New Zealand, 40 to 45% hotels closed over that time. We fast forward to today, positively, we have seen improvement. And today we only have between 10 and 12% of hotels that are now closed. Many of those may not open before the end of the year and probably won't reopen until 2021. So, you can still see the impacts of this pandemic playing out in the hotel space. When we look at the occupancy levels, as the survey said, we had 70% down in prior year. It is gradually improving. Month over month, we see gradual improvement in this space, but it is very much a two-tiered approach. When we look at the results in our hotel partners, there is almost a regional versus a CBD split or divide, and that's driven by the kind of travel that's existing. And we've already spoken about, it is very much domestic centric with the restrictions and the government's requirements that are in play at the moment and border closures. It is also intrastate. So not surprisingly, those regional cities are outperforming CBD locations. In the regional areas, some of our hotel partners are telling us, occupancies are back to pre-COVID levels and that 50% plus or even up to 70 in some locations. And that's influenced partly by the type of traveller that's travelling. And we've talked about the fact that we've had mining, wholesale trade and construction and healthcare services travelling to their local intrastate locations, but it's also partly driven by some of the leisure travel as well. So people doing staycations and traveling, getting in the car and driving to hotels, that's also pushing up some of that regional occupancy. Juxtaposing that though, in the CBDs, we're definitely seeing an opposite trend. Not surprisingly, the bulk of the hotel closures that exist today are still in the CBD locations. Cities like Sydney, you're looking at 15 to 20% occupancy with hotel closures existing here. But there are some variations. Cities like Perth are outperforming the market, and cities like Auckland as well, also outperforming the market, where occupancy levels are bouncing back in those locations. And similarly, that we talked about in the airspace, when you look at the results in New Zealand, with the relaxing of the lockdown restrictions, hotel demand starts to pick up significantly. So you can really start to see that demand coming back in that market quite quickly. And hopefully with border openings in Australia at some point, we'll see a similar kind of trend. If we look at what hotels have done, and again, we talked to our hotel partners, the survey definitely reflects a lot of the conversations we've had over the last 6 months. Not surprisingly, demand is down, we know that, and supply is very high. So naturally, rates are low at the moment, and they're low significantly. As we move into 2021 and hopefully the restrictions on travel are lifted, demand will ultimately come back and those rates will slowly but surely start to come back up. But looking at the forecast into 2021, we don't expect those rates to come back to pre-COVID levels. In fact, in the Australia and New Zealand market, speaking with our suppliers and looking at the survey, you'll see, we're forecasting a 4.5% decrease in rates through into 2021. If you look at the little graph on there as well, you can see, 32% of hotels have rates decreasing, 55% are staying on hold, and 13% see a rate increase. I do think it's interesting just to flag, while demand is very low and supply is high at the moment and the rates are down, over the longer term, and we're going to talk about some of the cleaning protocols that come into play in a moment, but that ultimately will flow through as a cost to the hotels and may ultimately impact rates in the year ahead. So it's just something to flag as we move into 2021 and demand starts to come back and hotels start to pass on the cost of the detail that comes from those cleaning protocols that we're going to just talk about. The type of rates has also changed somewhat when we talk about hotels. Obviously, a lot of our large market customers have fixed negotiated rates based on volume. With the change in travel patterns and what the future looks like into 2021, it's difficult to predict what those travel patterns will be and what those volumes are going to be into 2021. So a lot of our hotel partners are rolling forward rates, but then overlaying them with dynamic flexible price rates, which allow you to then flow with the market. So you get the best of both worlds. You have your corporate negotiated rate in addition to the flexible bar rate, which then allows you to flow with the market conditions. So having those two rate types in the market now certainly allows for a bit more confidence when it comes to ensuring you have the best possible rates. Flick, I'll get you to change slides. In the survey, we saw that 74% of businesses said that they were going to review their hotel supply strategy over the next little while and into 2021. And part of that comes down to really looking at stringent cleaning, health and hygiene protocols. That's been a big conversation that we've had with hotel partners over the last several months. And certainly our customers are asking for it. And we see a lot of information coming out about that. So as we look to rebuilding traveller confidence, the hotel industry as a whole has jumped on this significantly. And really, as we hit the middle of that pandemic, after we came out of the real bottom of the curve into May and June, nearly every major hotel chain in the world introduced very, very detailed, stringent cleaning and safety protocols with very detailed glossy booklets that had all of the information that they were doing to really ramp up the safety of hotel stays and to instill traveller confidence. There was a heap of information over that period, and certainly some of the work that Felicity, you and I did, and the 4D team, we consolidated that information into a very concise sort of manner to try and navigate through the wealth of information that came out of that period. And then when we look at that cleaning protocols, we sort of drilled it down to sort of three key areas. Firstly, it's the check-in and public spaces, room cleaning, and then the changes in food and beverage functionality at the hotels. So if I sort of briefly step through those, I won't go into too much detail, but I'll step through those sort of three key areas just to give you a bit of an insight into the new world traveller journey, I guess. Firstly, in this period, when you arrive at a hotel, you're going to see hand sanitizer in the lobby. Your check-in experience is going to be quite different. You will sometimes have Perspex glass. It'll be much swifter check-in. The public spaces are going to have less furnishings and are all socially distanced furniture, etc. So to allow for less congregation in the public areas. And then when you get up into the room, first thing you're going to notice is really a change in the amount of clutter in the rooms. So a lot of hotels now have removed, the old service compendiums, single-use stationery pens, etc. All of that sort of collateral has been removed. And then they've really focused on high-touch area deep cleaning. So things like your TV remote control, telephones, light switches, etc. Significantly enhanced cleaning protocols into play for that. Not to mention the bathroom. And in many instances, a lot of hotels are using, electrostatic cleaning guns to really take out the bacteria in the room. And then they're even sealing the door so that when you arrive at the hotel, the ultimate confidence is the room has been cleaned and no one's been in that room since it's been cleaned. So there's a lot of innovation happening in that space as well. And it's similar to what Greg was saying in the airspace. Hotels are adapting very quickly and introducing a whole lot of new standards that help deliver that cleaning safety and hopefully instill traveller confidence. And the last piece that I talked about was food and beverage. Obviously with all of the protocols that are in play now, the day of the buffet breakfast is long gone, for at least for now. So certainly the style of breakfast offering at a hotel has been modified, and that comes down to, depending on the standard of hotel you're staying in, it could be an a la carte style breakfast, grab and go, continental. There are variations that exist, but it certainly is a more user-friendly style of breakfast, taking out that multi-touch experience. So again, enhancing that cleaning and traveller safety. So a lot of work being done, a lot of innovation, and a lot of key cleaning and enhancements that are done at a hotel level, not only in the transient traveller space, but also now introducing into the meetings and event space. So hotels are really ramping up innovation in that space as well to again instill traveller confidence. So that 37% of our customers are reviewing that. We have a whole bunch of information that we can share with you and help you make those informed choices. And then again, in terms of recovery, look, there's a lot of doom and gloom in this whole period, but I think one of the really positive things that is still happening in the hotel space is supply is increasing. Hotel construction, new openings, they are continuing, and there's a whole lot of fantastic new product that's about to come on board over the next few months and then into 2021. I mean, there are 42 plus hotels going to be opening in the Australian market between now and the end of 2021. And in addition, over 14 new hotels in New Zealand. Even in Melbourne, which is in a lot of trouble right now, but there's 14 new hotels open in the next 12 months in New Zealand, in Melbourne. So there's some significant investment in this space. So in terms of innovation, we've got the cleaning and safety protocols. A lot of the corporate rates now are much more flexible. So again, you have that flexibility, maximum 24-hour cancellation, same day cancellation in many instances. So you've got the cleaning confidence, flexibility, and then a whole lot of new supply coming into market as well, which I think hopefully will instill some confidence once we get these restrictions lifted.
Great, thanks, Andrew. What a question for you? What innovation are you seeing coming through from some of the hoteliers to attract the business traveller back in?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think is probably really ramped up over the course of the last few months has been the use of technology. So almost a lot of hotels now have the ability to do contactless check-in. So you can almost bypass the front desk. Your corporate booking flows through to your mobile becomes your digital key that lets you access your room, and you can bypass the check-in desk completely. That was being implemented pre-COVID, but it has ramped up significantly over this period as well. Similarly, if you don't have the digital key functionality, once you're in the hotel, talking and contacting within the hotel, a digital experience there as well, whether it's iPads in the room, whether it's using the TV to order room service, a lot of that sort of stuff is definitely ramped up as well. So there's been some fast tracking in the technology space, I think, that's really sort of shown some innovation. In addition to some of the sort of new unique ways hotels are laid out, the room styles laid out, there's been some cool stuff done there as well.
Great. Do you think, and I noticed in Europe and in parts of Asia, hotels are offering themselves as, work from a hotel because some offices have been closed down as part of this process. Do you think that's going to happen in Australia and New Zealand?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to see some of the hotel suppliers in this market doing that. Almost day use rates for those of us who are working from home, the ability to use a hotel room as a short-term office space for a day. That sort of stuff is definitely coming into play. Yes.
Great. Okay. And the big question is, what do you see by way of hotel rates for the next 12 months? Are they going to remain flat and low, or will the year ahead look a little bit different?
Yeah, I think just back to that other slide, I do think rates will remain low, definitely. I think demand is going to be sub pre-COVID for at least the next 12 months. I don't think we're going to get back to pre-COVID travel levels. I don't think any of our forecasts suggest that. So yeah, I do think the market will be suppressed and rates will be lower than pre-COVID for at least the next 6 to 12 months. As demand increases, naturally they will come back up, but yeah, they will be down, I think, for the next 12 months.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're seeing in with customers that we're working with is the seasonality of rates for next year is really starting to come through, and not just in your typical locations such as Darwin. So yeah, it's interesting year ahead. Thanks, Andrew. That was a really great insight into accommodation. So I guess before we move to questions, I wanted to share some thoughts as we look ahead into next year. COVID-19 has created a once-in-a-lifetime impact on us personally, economically, across our businesses and so forth. And there's been many times over the past now 7 months that we've each had to rewrite the rule books. And I know I've done that on a personal level and also, working with the many customers I get to work with. We've change the rule books. We've been forced to react and make quick decisions in situations where there was so much uncertainty. And I really think that is changing the way that we all continue to work in our jobs moving forward. So I think that that'll start to play out in business travel and also our businesses. Business travel is a critical component of success for many industry sectors, and the road to the eventual return is set to be bumpy and very unpredictable. We've seen that over the last few months, and we envisage that for well into next year. But as a company and as an industry group, we are working with various different groups and governments to safely open up borders and allow the possibility of quarantine exemption for business travellers and so forth. And that is another topic and most probably another webinar in itself. But it's definitely something, even just recently, Japan announced that incoming South Korean business travellers would be, quarantine exempt. So it's all changing, and there's a lot that's going to play out, but it's going to be different. And I think it's going to be exciting, having been in this industry for the many years that I have. One thing is certain, there will be many more changes, and both within restrictions and attitude. But, you know, we don't have a crystal ball. There's not one person or business or government that knows what the next 12 months is going to, you know, present to us. But as peers, as business travel procurement teams and travellers, all take advantage of the information and the lessons learned that the report has shared with you. Don't forget to lean into your travel management company and your travel suppliers as you start to transform your travel program. And I know many of you have transformed your program already, but essentially I think it's going to continue to evolve. So work with the industry professionals, and feel free to at any time to reach out and talk to your account managers and the travel management companies. Returning to business travel means that, you know, there's going to be a lot more information out there. Access all the latest tools and information that you can. And yeah, it's, like I said, it's a time to work together. So what I'm going to do is open to some questions, and the team, and thank you to everyone who has actually been posting questions. I can see that there's a lot that have come through. So what I'm going to do is, the team have been just posting those questions through to me, so bear with me. We've had a question from Tom. Who is the leading body that is lobbying the state governments for open borders, especially WA? So I guess, Tom, the answer here, and I'll get some comments from you, Greg, as well. We've seen a lot of this play out in the media over the past few months. And there is an industry group that includes representatives from AFTA, Flight Centre Travel Group, and other travel companies, and also airlines like Virgin Australia that have been in regular contact with state governments to push borders open here in Australia. Greg, was there any other thoughts or comments you wanted to share to that question?
No, Felicity, I think you answered it really well. Graham Turner Screw is obviously very actively involved from our side of things here as a group, just about championing the safe opening of borders, and really just getting to the point that we can get some safe consistency in terms of protocols as to what are the next necessary steps to enable a safe opening of borders. So it's obviously critical for a lot of trade at the moment, and it's critical for the whole supply chain that things open, but I will reiterate it has to be safely.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thanks, Greg. Next question is from Mark. Do you envisage changes to fees and commissions paid to travel agents like yourself? Separately, can agents offer new services to travellers, example, visa applications and so forth? Look, Mark, given the uncertainty of volumes, it's difficult to assess at this time. In regards to offering new services, you know, we offer end-to-end travel services, and that also includes, you know, visas and so forth. So we currently do that. So I hope that answers that question. Next question is from Danielle. Are any hotels offering better room service options, cheaper or more options? I might hand to you, Andrew, for that one.
Good question. I think it's probably fair to say hotels are modifying their offerings and innovating in many ways. So I do think there probably are a number of new offerings that are out there, whether, as I mentioned before, it's through enhanced technology for delivering a room service, or a modified menu associated with keeping up to date with COVID standards. I do imagine that there probably is quite a bit of adjustment in that space for sure.
Yeah, and you know, I think, you know, and we mentioned it before, the fact that the rule books have changed. Some of them have been broken and completely rebuilt. So I think this next 12 months is really going to unearth some great changes. And Greg, you spoke to that as well, around that airspace as well. So yeah, I think the year ahead is going to be, it's going to be bumpy, but I think it's going to be exciting. Okay, I've got one more question here, and I might actually, yeah. So, what is the prediction of when we will have a fully open Trans-Tasman bubble? So I might go to you, Greg, on that one. I know I'm kind of looking forward to knowing when.
Yeah, I think we all are, Felicity. It's hard to know. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the political landscape at the moment that's challenging some of the border restrictions being opened. I mean, we saw some glimmers of hope, obviously, with New Zealand allowing some travel into some parts of Australia. And I suppose the bit behind that, it wasn't exempt of all quarantine conditions as well, because you may have to travel back to New Zealand and go into quarantine. So, yeah, it still seems to be quite a way off, unfortunately. We're watching very closely airline availability being loaded into our GDS partners to see what's there. It seems to be a rolling 90 days at the moment. So the latest that we're seeing around this is probably not until that sort of late January, early February period in terms of what we see as schedules that have been loaded. So we're obviously hopeful early in the new year will be the time that we'll start to see some relaxation of the Trans-Tasman border. And obviously that will flow through into some of the South Pacific countries as well, with limited restrictions and limited COVID cases over there at the moment as well.
Yeah, no, interesting. And I think, a lot of the recovery in other parts of the world has been, the charge has been led by leisure travellers. So, those corridors, as they open, I know a lot of people, such as myself in Melbourne, will be keen to take a holiday somewhere outside of Victoria. Okay, well, thanks for that, Greg. So we are pretty much out of time. I know there's possibly a couple of extra questions that have come through. We haven't been able to answer them, but definitely if there's some themes in those questions that, we feel that we can, we will actually, reach out and let people know some other commonly asked questions and answers. I'd like to thank both of you, Greg and Andrew, for your insights. Greg, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, thanks, Felicity. I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to join today's call to have a conversation with you all. And, congratulations on the report. There's some fantastic global insights that are in it. So probably the parting remarks that I'd like to say is that our airline partners have the ability to scale. So they'll be watching demand extremely closely. So I would say don't be afraid about supply. There will be an abundance of supply in the marketplace. Don't be afraid of booking classes being available, because they will be there. All our airline partners have to hit a certain level of critical mass to get in positive territory, and they'll be doing everything they can to put supply in to make sure demand tries to meet that. So as we recover through this, I think the landscape will be different, but it'll be quite positive as we're starting with quite a low base.
Great, thanks, Greg. And Andrew, what are your closing comments?
Thanks, Felicity. Again, I echo Greg. Thank you for including me in this. It's been great to catch up with everyone. I think, look, from a hotel perspective, there is a lot of choice in the hotel space across both Australia and New Zealand, and there's a lot of information out there. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to us, speak to us, speak to your travel manager, your account manager, you guys at 4D. We can certainly help you navigate all of that information and find the right choices for you. So let us be your eyes and ears and help you with getting back to travel.
Great, thanks, Andrew. That was a good one. So we're just about out of time, and I'll wrap up the discussion now. I'd like to thank our panelists, Greg and Andrew, again, for some amazing insights and just sharing your depth of knowledge has been absolutely amazing. And I know there'll be a time again that we get on a call and talk more about it as we move into next year. An on-demand version of this webinar is going to be available. So if you wanted to listen to it again or share it with your peers or colleagues, you most certainly can do that. So that'll be sent out shortly. And finally, I just want to say that I look forward to seeing each of you back up in the air for business very soon. So thanks for listening and take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.